The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those expressing them and do not necessarily reflect the OSIP Foundation Incorporated or any other group or individual. This podcast may contain dialogue or subject material that could be considered for mature audiences only. All aspects of how you play the game and the OSIP Foundation Incorporated are protected by copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Unauthorized use without the express written consent of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated is strictly prohibited. If you're interested in sponsoring How You Play the Game, please email us at podcast@osipfoundation.org. Your sponsorship may be tax deductible. Well, hide your kids, hide your wives, and hide your husbands. It's time for another episode of How You Play the Game, the official podcast of the OSIP Foundation Incorporated. Yours truly, Jack Furlong, with you as we talk to you about what's going on as far as the world of sportsmanship is concerned. This is the second episode of the month of August. The year is 2020. Hope everybody is doing well. As always, you can find us on the interwebs at osipfoundation.org. You can contact the show. The address is podcast@osipfoundation.org. And on social media, we have facebook.com/osipfoundation, and Twitter and Instagram are both at OSIP Foundation, hashtag how you play the game. We got a really great episode for you today. We have another roundtable discussion. Thanks to the invent of technology, we've got them all via the computer. Our good friends from the Plate Meeting Podcast and Close Call Sports, first of all the way out in California, the musical meister of the Anaheim Ducks, Mr. Gil Imber. Gil, hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Getting by.
as we all are. And from Connecticut, the birthday boy, he doesn't look a day over 43, and he's much better looking than Bob Davidson, Mr. Tim McCaffrey. Tim, how are you?
Yes, and I wear the hat to show that I keep my toupee in place. So
that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
You know what? Technology is an amazing thing. We have Zoom calls, and you have a hat, so we're just moving on up. We have a great episode for everybody today. The reason I got both Gil and Tim on today is because as the baseball season has gotten underway, the short sprint that we have this year for baseball, we know that it's not like anything that we've had before. We know that it's just a different animal altogether. We have recently witnessed a handful of situations that require handling in our game. And we've also had a situation that was kind of unprecedented in some of the nice words that were said. And as I was kind of juggling them and trying to comprehend them and whatnot, I thought that based upon the nature of those and based upon the nature of our world right now, as we are all behind our computers, this would be a great idea to get the guys in and chat about it. And let's start with the positive that kind of was the impetus for me taking note and saying this is the great idea. We had a situation in Texas where we have a lot of call-up umpires this year, a lot of first-time umpires due to the nature of a lot of guys opting out for various legitimate reasons. And we had what's his name? Nate Tomlinson made his debut, and he was in Texas, and he had a number of replayed calls that were overturned and whatnot. And the broadcasters, Tom Grieve and Dave Raymond of the Texas Rangers, did something that they didn't have to do, but it was very heartwarming and very touching. And Gil, since you broke the story, why don't we start with you, and then Tim, I'll turn it over to you for some comments as well. Gil, why don't you tell us what you reported, what happened, and your thoughts on it, and then Tim, if you could follow that as well.
MLB is debuting a slew of rookie umpires this year, people who have not called regular season games due to largely the opt-outs of the big league full-timers. And we're about to get to the double-digit mark for debuts. Nate Tomlinson was one of the more recent ones. He debuted in Arlington, and he proceeded within the first 3 innings of the game to have 2 overturned calls, and then later on in the game, the 6th, there was another one. They were all plays at second base involving steals and things of that nature. So he had some overturned calls. He had 3 OTs, and that's a tough debut to have. So you go to the headset. Bill Miller's has to give the sign that we're reversing the call 3 times. He comes out of that, and you're thinking what you're thinking, and it's really easy to kick someone when they're down. But Tom Grieve of the Texas Rangers, he's the color guy, and he sort of took his play-by-play and tried to bring him back on course, because there's an extended cut of this that maybe 5-10 minutes long that you listen to, and Grieve is talking about, hey, chin up, keep doing your gig. You've been around for so long. You're here for a reason. All of these uplifting messages, because it's quite easy for a fan, player, coach, anyone else to see something and see an umpire. Why did they even bring this guy on? He can't do anything, and not realize all the work that went in. And so Grieve paints the human picture, the story behind the actual umpire on the field, the off-field stuff. He says what's going on. His play-by-play guy makes a joke about, it's fun to yell at the umpires. And when Grieve says, it's not right to take cheap shots, the other guy says, but it's fun. And Grieve says, well, maybe, but that's not right, and tries to bring him back on track. So Grieve was really the guy who was dedicated to trying to spread the humanity message and the kindness message here, which is a real pick-me-up in the world where we don't get that too often.
Yeah, first of all, it's never fun to punch down. If you find yourself punching down at those less fortunate or those don't, and when you look at it's the players and the media punching down at the umpires, they don't have a voice to fight back with. So if it's equal voice, if it's 2 people that have equal voice, that's fine. But if they don't have an opportunity to defend themselves, which this happens all the time, then what are we doing here? We have to allow, and that's where we come in. So I give all the credit to Gil on this. He found it out. We talked a little bit about 2 overturns, and then Gil found the 3rd overturn and listened to a little bit of the audio. And the next thing you know, in the umpire world, we have a video that went viral, at least as far as umpires go, because it's a small community. But these uplifting messages are the ones that we've tried to get out for a number of years in our continued quest to change the culture of umpiring. We both have been on this show before. We've talked about it at great length. And the only way you do that is if you take a long game approach and you try to put out the positives, but also you gain the respect of the community, because when there is a mistake, you try to learn from it. We acknowledge that it was a mistake and we try to learn from it. In this situation, Nate Tomlinson had 2 very non-normalized plays at second base, 2 steal plays that were overslides. They were tricky plays to get right. He didn't get them right. Then he had a 3rd play. He was probably in shell shock. And then the response was incredible. I mean, you got big league guys texting him. You've got, former minor league guys and current minor league guys messaging him, and just all chin up, chin up, chin up. And the only reason I know this is because a few have reached out to me for, contact information, which I didn't have. But that's, one of the reasons Bob Davidson posted on the site. Just the guys that stick up when you have your worst day. I always tell the guys on my crew, always told them that your best day, don't get too high and don't get too low on the worst day, because it can flip-flop just in a span of 24 hours.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you also pointed out a great point that, the first 2 plays that Nate had were, not normal plays. You had the overslides, and he's, you're making your debut and you're dealt, something that's not, completely run of the mill. And, of course you're gonna, maybe pause, question, who knows what was exactly going on. But, I think the bigger point is, maybe he was a little shell shocked on that 3rd one. And all of the responses that you gave point to the compassion that, people in the community have, and how we should be acting in general. If you go down the page, as you mentioned, there's a great comment from former MLB umpire Bob Davidson and whatnot. And these are all, these are all great things to remind us that these guys are human and they're going to make mistakes. And we're just like all of us, we're all either going to have bad days at the office, or we're all going to be nervous, or we're all going to run the gamut of human emotions. And I was just so, touched by that. And yet, then I'm scrolling down the page and I still see the one guy who makes the snide comment about still should have hired Jeremy Rehack and whatnot. And, it just goes to show you that there are still those guys out there who, for whatever reason, kind of like Gil alluded to at the beginning with Dave Raymond, saying, hey, it's still fun to take cheap shots and whatnot, where, yeah, okay, so good-natured ribbing is one thing, but it seems like without the proper context, without knowing the guys and whatnot, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, there's still guys out there who just either don't get it or just don't know the time and the place, or, just don't take a moment to think before they hit send or before the words leave their mouths or whatever the case may be, which we see everywhere in life. I mean, we are in a climate of social media where we shoot first and ask questions later. And it's an unfortunate thing. It's something that we have to deal with, but it's not uncommon, and it's just good to see, though, that the majority of people are reacting in a way to support Nate. And really it couldn't, we really couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, anything better would be basically perfection, which I know we can't have.
Well, we had a guy criticize an umpire in Milwaukee, Eric Backus, because he missed a couple pitches in his first game. We've lost our minds collectively as a society, but I'll leave that as it may.
Right.
As far as baseball goes, we've lost our minds if we think that we're going to compare a guy who's wearing 113 or whatever number Mr. Backus is wearing to Ted Barrett. And let's give these guys a chance to grow. I mean, we're putting these guys, that some of whom haven't worked a big league spring training game, into Major League Baseball games, to which they just don't have a feel of how fast the game is or the pace of the way the game is. And now what's amazing about the crews now, Jack, is that you have guys that were 4s last year, and maybe 4s only for a couple of years, that are now 2s on crews. And with so many guys either injured or out, and most of them senior members of the staff, you've lost a whole number basically. So now some 3s are Chiefs and a lot of 2s are 1s, and it's between the injuries and the opt-outs, they're just a dearth of experienced officials. So we have to understand that these kids are going to get better just through experience. That's just the way it is, and we have to allow them to get that experience and not try to micromanage their every detail.
Right. And to further explain that, these guys who were coming up who have never seen Major League spring trainings and whatnot, I know Sean and I joke about this all the time with me knowing sleeve numbers. These guys are wearing 3-digit sleeve numbers, which is the first time I think it's happened in Major League Baseball. But it's a necessity based upon how so many guys are out this season. And who knows what's going to happen in the future? I mean, assuming that, everything dies down and goes back to normal, these guys probably go back to the minor leagues, et cetera, et cetera. But you're absolutely right in that the number of senior guys, number of crew chiefs, number of guys who are number 1s on crews are simply not there. And there are a lot of guys, there are 7, 8, 9 guys who are promoted to interim crew chiefs right now who are, who may be ready and willing. They're 2s or something like that. They're number 2 guys on the crew. But like you said, there are also some 3s on crews who are up there and might be, not ready for prime time per se by the letter of the law and whatnot. And there are a lot of guys who are the rookies, the 4s on the crews, so to speak, who are, basically, lieutenants, and number 2s. And it's just the nature of the world. And it begs for compassion. There's a lot of guys who just are thrust into this situation, whether they're ready or not. And whether they feel they're ready or not, it's just going to be what it is. It's going to be a different animal. And it behooves us in the state of things right now to show a little respect. I mean, the only converse that I could argue, and this isn't meant to be something that I support, I'm just trying to think out loud here. If everybody in our society right now is hypersensitive and very on edge and whatnot, I mean, I think I speak for a lot of people when we say we want life to go back to normal, and we're fed up and so on and so forth. We did the episode on mental health on your show. It's crazy, and I wonder if people are either already on edge so that when they see something like this, they snap right away, or a deeper problem, which speaks to a deeper issue, is that if they feel that arguing or yelling at officials is part of the nature of what they are allowed to do as fans, then this is something that kind of gets them back to reality. And again, I don't subscribe to those. I don't believe that they are inherently right. I'm just wondering if those are things where people are kind of, where their minds are leading them to think that that's going to give them some level of normalcy, or is just a not natural consequence of the situation.
Gil, I'll let you take that.
Sure. The situation is largely like a union strike with replacement officials to an extent. That's essentially what we have. And it's without any of the labor strife that comes with that. It's just a very odd situation that reminds me very much of a replacement official situation. And there are several ways that those things are handled by the on-field personnel. Taking out, of course, the idea that you want the dispute resolved so you can get the regulars back. This is not one of those situations. So outside of that consideration, what you have is, that there are going to be learning issues. There are going to be some humps in the road to negotiate, and that there will be calls that sometimes don't appear to make much sense. They might be right. We had a situation, speaking of which, in a little bit of a tangent, we had a situation of a ball that was received poorly in Pittsburgh that was down the middle, yet called a ball because the catcher received it very, very poorly. That resulted in an ejection. And then we later, in a different game, and this was the bench clearing brawl game in Oakland, we had a pitch that was received a little bit better, but still slightly poorly, that was also within the bounds of the strike zone, and it was called a strike. And that resulted in an ejection. So the problem is that we want it both ways. And when we don't get it, and notwithstanding what the quality of correctness is, because what I've realized from doing years of the ejection reports, managers don't care if you got the call right. If it hurt their team, it's a bad call. Doesn't matter what the rule says. And so in this situation, we get replacement officials, newer officials, whatever we want to call the triple digit situation that's going on. It really doesn't matter. If the call is against the team, then you're a bad umpire. If the call is for the team, then you're good. And the thing that needs to be said really is that we have to adjust our expectations on all ends, because from the umpiring end, from the logical end, we know that we have young people coming up that need to get their feet wet and actually have that on-the-job training. And that means that there are going to be hiccups. Fortunately, we have replay review to help out with a lot of that. But at the same time, we have to be very cognizant that just because the call went against you doesn't mean that the call was incorrect. It just means that your interpretation of what the call should have been is perhaps influenced by your allegiance.
You're absolutely right. And, I remember watching both of those plays that you referenced. And, the one in Pittsburgh, I believe, was Ramon de Jesus. And the one in Oakland, I think, was Nick Marley.
Yep.
And both of those guys are actually not even, they're younger umpires, but they're not triple-digit umpires. I believe De Jesus, was he hired to the full-time staff? And Marley, I think, is still a call-up, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this seems to be the situation, if I may, it's on the razor's edge. But this is the difference between the full-time staff and the call-up staff. The full-time staff calls a more traditional strike zone based on baseball folklore, whereas the call-up staff has been largely trained throughout their career to call to the computer. And so when we see something that a call-up umpire calls that might be received poorly but is technically correct per the computer, there's a reason for that. They've been trained their entire career to call to the computer, whereas the old school guys who may have even preceded the advent of Pitch FX or its children, those guys and gals might not have been trained to call to the computer because the computer never existed for them, which means that they call an old school zone which presents problems of its own, just as the flip side of the coin, the umpires who called the computer, without regard to the catcher's reception, presents problems from a different end, all based on team perception of how the call affects the team.
You nailed it, because in the situation in Oakland, Nick Marley called it according to the computer, and who's the manager that he ran but Dusty Baker, an old school guy who, so I don't think I have to, spell it out for people that that's where some of that dissonance can occur. And I think that leads us into, another good discussion, because one of the situations that prompted me to start thinking about this roundtable discussion was in Philadelphia with Angel Hernandez and his crew, working the doubleheader between the Yankees and the Phillies. And, it's no, I don't think that it's, any surprise to anybody that, Angel Hernandez has, shall we say, a history. We know that he is battling a lawsuit right now with Major League Baseball over racial discrimination. And I think we also know that the guy, in his previous years may have made some questionable calls, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't improved. That doesn't mean that he's not a fantastic guy. And now he is showing with his numbers just how good of an official he is. And yet the perception is such that he is the worst. He trends on Twitter like he's a political figure. I get text messages from people all the time because they know that I'm an umpire. They're just talking about how bad he is. There's the famous meme where on the iPhone it says "missed call Angel Hernandez." I have a buddy who texted me on opening night because Angel Hernandez was behind the plate of the Nationals and the Yankees game. And he said, yep, one of my friends just texted me, there's Angel Hernandez making it. I mean, it's all over social media. It's become an animal of its own. And when I heard what Phil Nevin said as he was being ejected in the situation that occurred, where he said basically something to the tune of, we all know you don't want to be here anyway. And then when I heard the commentary, I'll specifically highlight Paul O'Neill, who clearly has a bias, and he's beloved by Yankee fans, but when it comes to discussing umpires, he hates them. And you want to draw a connection to Joe Torre and what he's done at the top of baseball since he was his manager for a while, go right ahead. I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility to make that connection, but it's sick to say that these announcers just come up and say whatever they want. They have no regard to the facts. It goes right back to that allegiance idea, and it is in dire need of examination and change.
Well, you'll recall that the Angel Hernandez lawsuit, and speaking of which, I wish that on my phone I would get something that said "missed call Angel Hernandez." Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yes.
You have to recall that Angel Hernandez lawsuit is suing that Joe Torre regime of Major League Baseball for racially motivated discrimination. I am always curious about the legal side of things, and the EEOC claims are very straightforward yet complex at the same time, as in straightforward enough as in we know what you can't do, but complex because there's minutia within that. But we have racially motivated discrimination. I'm always curious that Angel's team, why don't you add a hostile work environment claim to that? And then I realized, well, if you add a hostile work environment claim to that, then you have to admit that umpiring in general, not just Angel, but everywhere, all umpires have to deal with a hostile work environment, which could put a lot of people, MLB, NBA, NHL, anyone, in very deep trouble if a court or if anyone else were to rule that, yeah, umpires have to deal with hostile work environment. But that said, we talked about the 3 overturned game from Tomlinson. Remember the 3 overturned game for Angel and how he was treated after that?
Oh, yeah.
That's another difference, right? Disparate treatment was part of his claims. There's another example per chance. Well, we have that. We have the Angel Hernandez ejection, which, oh, by the way, was the correct call. Again, this is the thing that it doesn't matter if the call is correct or not. It matters how the team perceives it. And the team has perceived Angel, and Angel has very clearly stated in the lawsuit that MLB continues to throw him under the bus. Joe West, in his written declaration, said, I have seen personally how MLB throws him under the bus. And they do it, and it's wrong. So this is something that is a consistent theme that for Angels team, they're hoping that the court, I've been looking at the case filings because they've asked the court to unseal documents, and the documents that they're asking the court to unseal, if I'm not mistaken, are documents that I believe per our numbers, and once the public sees these numbers, but we've been keeping track of these numbers for a long time, will show that Angel is actually pretty good at his job. And not just pretty good, but actually better than some of the people that got promoted instead of him.
Right.
And those are sort of the claims that he's been making for a while now, but he's looking for data, objective data, to back that up, actual numbers. So it's in a situation where Angel's just threatening to expose a lot of what has happened in baseball, and a lot of people just do not like that because there's merit to what he said, and people feel threatened by that. And you can say what you want about it, but with all of the social things that are going on right now, this would be the time for that lawsuit, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gil, I thought you did great work to help Joe West in his case against Paul LaDuca. I think his lawyers just could have went to our website and cut and pasted. We know that people have in the past cut and pasted stuff off our website and used it as official documents. But as for this situation with Angel, I mean, again, you said we're looking, we've done a lot of the work for them, and we have the spreadsheets over the overturned calls. It doesn't take too much digging to find out that Angel Hernandez is an upper half plate umpire. And for an old school guy, one of the senior members of the staff, let's remember that Angel was in baseball in the 80s. So, he's been around for a really long time. And, for him to be able to call to the strike zone better than a lot of the veteran guys also shows that he should be a chief. And I again, I don't like to get too much into the weeds of the culture, because I like to feel that we've done a good job to change the culture at closecallsports.com. However, 3 of the umpires that get the most vitriol are minorities, and I don't probably have to explain to you who those 3 are. And I'll guarantee you that there is some kind of subconscious bias with people that, they're focused on, it's somebody I don't like, and they don't know why they don't like them. I mean, I happen to know people that know Angel Hernandez really well, and they all tell me he's a great guy. Yep. People have run into people that know, and he's a great guy. And that's happens over and over again. Yet the mainstream public, I did a game last year, not to sidetrack, I was doing an under 16 game down the street from me. And the guy, the coach from one of the teams come up, he knows, the other coach said, this guy's done some professional baseball. A guy comes up to me, goes, "Hey, do you know that umpire, that big league guy, Angel Fernandez? He blew the calls the other night." Like, Angel Fernandez? No, I'm sorry, I don't know him. But this is a guy who doesn't even know his name, yet he's going around telling his kids, other umpires, the other coach, this guy blew 2 calls last night. I even know, and again, I do all the replays. He didn't blow 2 calls last night. He made it up. Just made it up.
Yeah.
Because why? I have no idea. Just it's easy to punch down. It's easy to bully people. Just made it up.
And let's not forget what you said. He called Hernandez Fernandez, which is a pejorative because that is a racially motivated misname. And it doesn't look like that. And you might think that you're going way overboard and assuming something that's completely not true. And you have to ask, well, why would he interpose H and F if it wasn't racially motivated? He knew that the race was involved in that decision subconsciously to misstate the name.
Yeah, he didn't say Angel Smith, I noticed. Right.
Yeah. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck,
Look, I don't want to get this into off the rails, but I have, this is something I'm working on. You work on it every day. You try to be focused. Starbucks closed their stores because of unconscious bias. We all have to be conscious of the unconscious bias we may have learned through our upbringing. And I can't speak for the rest of you guys. I was very privileged, and we have to understand that we might be luckier than somebody else, and that the pictures that we may see on the television may not be the way it is, and we may be cultured not even know it to not like certain things, that, here's the example vegetables, right? I was cultured to not like because, you don't want to eat your vegetables stink. And I like Brussels sprouts. I like broccoli. I like most vegetables. But it was always, no, they're terrible. Everybody says they're terrible. I'm not going to eat them. And you eat them, and it's not that bad. Well, Angel Hernandez is like vegetables. He's not that bad. It's pretty good, actually.
Well, the one thing that you'll that I've always noticed is we can look for this very minor micro thing that goes on with Angel when a call gets when someone in the media currently, the modern media, writes a story about Angel Hernandez, they do not call him Angel Hernandez with the acentos and all of that. They call him Angel Hernandez with accents over letters. They ethnicize his name. I mean, in the media guide, there are no accents on his name. Call what his name actually is in the book. This is MLB's book. The umpires approve MLB's book. Call him his actual name. Don't ethnicize him when he doesn't wish to be. And I don't know any better example to show you that it is racially motivated than someone adding accents onto his name when the official book by the league doesn't have that.
Wow. Is there any example of them doing that for players, Gil? I mean, that's a great catch.
With players, the players, they either have the accents, in which case the media uses them, or they don't, in which case the media doesn't use them. But they do it with I noticed this where I forgot I think it might have been the Yahoo guy. I don't remember what the name, and honestly, I do not care what the names are. But I noticed that he started putting accents on Angel's name when he wrote something that Angel is bad. And that is an implicit association of race with negative qualities. And that's no accident, but it sure is subconscious, and it sure is it's a blight on the culture of the sport, which is exactly what Angel is suing the league for. And it's exactly why they don't like him, that do these reporters, because not only is he suing the league, he's suing the culture that perpetuates the reporters doing this. So the reporter very subconsciously, and might not see it, but the reporter has to acknowledge that Angel is calling them out. And the reporters do not like that, nor do the fans, nor do the players and the teams.
Well, nobody likes to be called out in general, and that's a great point. For the record, Tim, both broccoli and Brussels sprouts give me gas, but that's neither here nor there.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. They're delicious.
That's why we have Gas X, which I had to explain to my non-Italian girlfriend is a thing. It's in every Italian household. But
let me ask you this:
okay.
Do sausage and peppers give you gas?
Peppers can. Sausage is usually okay.
Okay, but I mean, let's be honest. There's plenty of good foods that don't always No,
you're absolutely right. I'm not arguing with you. I just wanted to get.
But don't use that. Yeah, don't use that as your excuse, though. I don't want to eat broccoli and Brussels sprouts because they make me gassy. That ain't good enough. They're delicious.
All I'm trying to do is get someone in the medical community to sponsor this show. That's all I'm trying to do right now. Okay, but you're absolutely right. And I've made this point before, and it's a grotesque point. It's a little bit of an overreach, I think, but I think it aligns perfectly with what both of you have said. And, I have likened the idea of hating on umpires and officials in general to be a new systematic, for lack of a better term, racism, because there is a superficial quality in I'm going to say, the way that we dress. We have the stripes on, or we're all wearing the blue, or what, however you want to describe it. But once you see that, it's an immediate trigger in your head. This guy is, or gal is, the enemy. And, that's why, like, whenever I watch certain shows on MLB Network and they'll say things like Ump Show and whatnot, and they're calling out their own employees basically as a result of that. And I say, what you're doing there is you are making it worse. You're making the culture worse. You're furthering this negative agenda that is this, a new specific civil rights movement, and it's sick because you are marginalizing people who don't have the same voice, like you said. officials don't get to grab a microphone and call out every single fan who called them a name. It's just not how it's done. And Angel Hernandez, as you've said, is a fantastic guy. I keep going back to the clip from a couple of years ago in the postseason. I want to say it was 2016. I could be wrong. When there was an issue with Anthony Rizzo of the Cubs. And, I think he started walking to first base and Angel called it a strike. And then in a later at-bat, I think it was his next at-bat, there was a conference on the mound and some dead time. And an Angel was wearing a microphone. And Anthony said to Angel, "Hey, I'm sorry about before." And Angel didn't have to do anything other than just say, "Hey, it's okay." And he went out of his way to say something along the lines of, "But that's how I know, Anthony, that you're a good guy, that you have the ability to say that. And that speaks to your character," and basically paid him these compliments, which does not get highlighted enough. The respect that I think that, that is there, or the examples of respect that can be there, gets completely negated and suppressed so that we can continue to get the vitriol and the hatred going as much, because that's what gets eyeballs to the screen. That's what gets the clicks and whatnot. And it's the conflict that raises the bottom line of the money and the dollar.
And just to buttress your point, Jack, I mean, if what he said there also, if I recall correctly, and Gilly can correct me if I'm wrong, since I'm wrong so often, is when he also said you're good to us, like he was taking the whole scenario of knowing Rizzo for as long as he has, like he's you're good to us, like you're a good guy to us. If you get that opportunity, get a little currency and react that way, if you're one of the good guys, you can get that. And a good umpire, and this is something that I teach on my crews all the time, is that the guy that complains all the time, we're going to give him a lot less rope than we're going to give to the guy that we've had for 15 games hadn't said a word. And that's what Angel was doing in that moment. And they put that moment on TV, let's be honest, to make Rizzo look good. Yeah. Because he had kind of showed up the umpire. Little did they know that it made, Angel look good. And nobody took that away, look at that and said, boy, that really makes Angel look good. The last time we had an umpire look really good on an incident on the field, to me, it was Tommy Hallion in the situation with Terry Collins and Noah Syndergaard, right? Right. And the way that whole situation broke down with Phil Cousy and Todd Tishner and Adam Hamari. Here's the thing. Major League Baseball tried to scrub that off the internet. They tried to take that video down. Here's umpires looking good, and baseball's like, oh, we don't want to have that. It doesn't fit our narrative. Yeah. So they tried to take that down. I mean, ridiculous. Now, they tried to say it was because, well, we had an agreement with the union. This couldn't get leaked. But I don't think there was anybody at the union going, boy, this is a bad look for us, Right. So
this was a good look. This is something you do want out there. And yet they're still in that, you're absolutely right. It's, we keep spinning our wheels with this, it's the same thing over and over again. We keep rehashing the same thing. Where do we go from here?
Well, we know one thing. We know that people like to complain, and that's just a constant. People are coming to sports. We always say it's sports. Oh, it's an escape from this and that and the other. Well, that doesn't mean that the rest of your life suddenly gets shut off when you go to sports. And we always say, as officials, you leave your day job at the door and all of that. But as a fan, there's no such obligation. As a player and coach, there's really no such obligation. And it's not like the rest of someone's life is shut off. This is just an acceptable way for them to vent, or it's a socially acceptable way for them to release some steam. So you can't go home, and you surely can't do anything on the domestic front, so you go out to the ball field and do it. And that's just how we are cultured now. Every society would have some sort of an outlet. This seems to be ours. Yeah. And umpires seem to be the acceptable punching bag. This is why I go back to the hostile work environment claim, to the point that you said. If MLB Network personalities are inciting vitriolic attitudes toward umpires and they have the same employer, then that by definition is a violation of labor law. Yeah. But again, you open Pandora's box if you ever press the issue there, because then throughout the country, you have a whole bunch of leagues and conferences that are in real serious trouble because they promote similar attitudes. one thing that we don't accept enough, and one thing that as an umpire you can sort of learn to accept, is the wabi-sabi concept of simply accepting other people for, if, oh yeah, this guy is going to complain, and just accepting, yeah, this guy's going to complain, this guy's going to insult me. That's okay. That's who that person is. It's not personal. I'll take it. And it's very tough to get to that level. It's absolutely impossible to get there from just standing still. It really takes work and it's very difficult. I don't know many people who are actually able to get there from the beginning, especially if you're a sensitive person to begin with.
Oh yeah.
A lot of sensitive people get into officiating because officiating, what they don't realize, especially in basketball, I get this a lot of the time, is I'll issue a technical foul for a violation of the rule, clear violation of the rule, and a player will say, "You're too sensitive." And I've learned to respond to that with, sensitivity is probably my greatest trait out here, because I need to have the sensitivity to know when a fight is about to happen.
Right.
I need to have the sensitivity to know instinctively on an out-of-bounds call that I have no idea what happened, how to read the players so that they can tell me what happened. Same thing with a safe out call in baseball, especially the call of, did the ball hit the bat or did the ball hit the hand of the batter? The batter will tell me that a lot of the time, and I need to have the sensitive perception to be able to figure that out. I need to be able to read people that way. And so sensitivity is very, very important for officials to have as a character trait. So that's what makes it so challenging to have the sensitivity to the character trait and be able to turn it on when appropriate. And it's not just between the lines during live ball action. It's a lot of dead ball, so to speak, officiating, because you have the dugout chirping at the pitcher, and you have to be able to tell if this is just a chirp, a harmless little thing that they do, or if this is going to incite something later on, if it could become a problem. As an umpire, you have to be able to read this stuff. And then when the pitch hits the guy in the back, well, is it a curveball? Does that make a difference between an off speed, a slider, a break? What are these what are these pitchers throwing generally? Is this an unusual thing for them? Do they have the control? Is this Joe Kelly breaking a window, playing the long game? And these are the things that you have to have the sensitivity characteristic to go through. And then you have to also be able to say, to turn that off when someone does get in your face and get all crazy and bent out of shape, because sensitivity at that point is probably not going to be helpful for you. And you just have to accept that this is going to happen. So I think that the greatest skill that an official can have in harnessing the power of sensitivity is really to expect and accept the things that you cannot change, the external locus who can control stuff. You only can control what you do. You can sort of influence what the players do, but when it comes down to a huge argument or a rhubarb or something like that, do know that people have other outside of the game reasons for acting the way they do.
Right. They
do have motivations that have nothing to do with you, which are even within the game, that do not involve you. They don't know you. And just when we have this confrontation that happens, and we want to change the culture so that the headbutting gets lessened, if not eliminated. It's not going to be eliminated, but less severe. Definitely, we want to get to that direction. But know that that's a very difficult battle to fight. And the easier battle to fight, while we simultaneously tackle that on the exterior front, the easier internal battle is to try to get the message that, or at least get the self-talk that says, this person's going to complain. This person is going to insult me. I'm going to warn. I'm going to eject per the rulebook subscription. But I don't have to take this personally. I don't really have to listen, because it really doesn't involve me. And once we accept that is an unfortunate negative part of the game, we have to accept the cloudy days just as we accept the sunny ones and the rainy ones and all of those things. But once we're able to accept the good with the bad, the job becomes a lot easier.
You know, what's funny is that, what you've just said strikes many chords in that, first of all, it is a like a baseball equivalent of a serenity prayer, in knowing, accepting, being granted the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. But in previous episodes on the show, I've talked about how, I have realized through this pandemic that I am clearly, a highly sensitive person as prescribed by Dr. Elaine Aaron, who is a psychiatrist in California. If you don't know who she is and you're looking for something to read, if you think you're overly sensitive, if you think you've been insulted about your sensitivity in the past, check this out. It has explained so much in my life, where I thought I was just different. And it's the God's honest truth. I am highly sensitive. I am an extreme example of highly sensitive. And what you just described, Gil, is something that I pray that I can get to one day, because I try. One of my biggest problems when I step on the field is not just the anxiety of waiting for when someone's going to complain, but the battle to realize that it's not personal. And I fight that every day, because I hear something and I know it's not personal, but my psyche tells me it is. And I walk off the field thinking I never want to work that game again. And it takes more time through therapy to get over that than it does time to actually work the game, the 2.5 hours where you're working that varsity game. And and there have been people who say to me, "Why do you do this? Why do you continue to umpire baseball if that's how it's going to be?" And I say, it's a blessing. It's one of the things I feel called to do. And it's a skill at which I'm good. So it's a battle, but I'm called to it. And you nailed it.
And I go back and forth, guys, about working. I love working the youth games, especially the 2-hour limits. Up here,
oh yeah,
$85 cash. It's
you are speaking my language. Yeah.
So I'll go out and I'll work some of those games still. So I'm like, anybody that says they can't work that type of game, if they work I'll work professional games, Division I games, all the way down to every once in a while like a 12U game. I don't work high school per se. But one of the reasons I don't is because I feel like it's a little too stressful. So when I work a youth game, I always have something in the back of my head. I want to, if I have a water bottle, I'll go try to engage one of the parents. Say, hey, you got to watch out for my grandmother likes to come here and yell at me. So if you see her, so you engage them. Or sometimes this will happen on the plate. They'll be yelling at me and they're right behind the backstop. It used to happen a lot of time. So I'd go back and I'd say, hey, Grandma, can you just tone it down? It's okay when you do this at home, but please stop doing it here in front of everybody. And they'll be mortified at first, and then they'll get always joking, because I'm trying to loosen them up. You're yelling at me on a 14-year-old game.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't make sense for you. It doesn't make sense for me. I'm not going to give you my resume. I'm going to try to lighten up the mood a minute. But let me tell you about good deeds and what they can accomplish. I'm doing a doubleheader at Drew University. Okay. And this kid was throwing a baseball around, and it went under one of the cars, right? So I'm getting dressed for the first game, and he can't get a baseball, so I have one in my car. I probably have 8 in my car, but I give him a baseball. And the parent is just amazed by this. I gave him, a banged-up Can-Am ball, So, to him, I told him it's a professional ball, and they can't. So it's all banged up stuff, not even barely a bad break. But the kid, it was unbelievable. So lo and behold, from the same team, there's an incident involving the kid. He doesn't get ejected, but he causes a situation. He's arguing balls and strikes, and he's a knucklehead. And I go back out to the car, and his father comes and tries to confront me and the other umpire, and screaming at us. And the parents and friends of the kid who I gave the baseball to are there to yell at him and get him to leave. And the coach finds out about it. I get contacted. The coach ends up suspending the parent from ever coming to another game again. So let me just explain my point to this. I feel like this is the culture that I'm not saying go have baseballs in your car and give them to a kid who loses a baseball in their car. I'm just saying react to what Gil said, your reactions of doing nice things for people, your sensitivity, all is the way that people are going to perceive you and react to you. One of the reasons that Major League umpires are so hated was because in 1992, when they threatened to not take the field because of the Sky Dome camera on top of the stadium. And I've talked to umpires, and I haven't brought it up on the podcast because it creates such vitriol. There were people that were upset with umpires for years. This was when so it's that culture that we're not trying to show the umpire as the enemy, but rather we're trying to show him or her as human, as relatable. And that's why, our videos are taking hold now, and Gil's done such a great job with changing that culture. I mean, not to promo, us for a second, but our YouTube page has over 200,000 views in the last 2 weeks. Okay, this is a relatively new page. And the reason that is because our message is working. It's resonating. And I'll give you another example. Jim Joyce, who's a friend of the show, went on Brian Kenny's show. And Brian Kenny has an audience that we couldn't reach in a year. Okay?
Right.
Millions of people. And on that show, he mentioned the challenge system of the strike zone. And Brian Kenny said, I hadn't heard that. That's an interesting idea. And he started thinking about it. And from what I understand, Brian Kenny actually likes the idea a little bit. Now, I don't want to get into the challenge system and all the machinations, but this is what we're trying to do. We can't just bang our head against the wall and scream into the megaphone and not have anybody hear us. We're lucky that we're communicating that message through certain umpires, and they are able to take that message to others. And it's germinating. It takes time, but I think it's working. And, hopefully in the next few years, we'll see the fruits of some of that labor. I think it goes away if the electronic strike zone is just put in place.
Right, yeah.
But, I like to think that what we're doing is having long-term ramifications in a certain degree, across the board, not only at the big league level, but down below at the lower levels as well.
I would agree with that. And I also love the 2-hour time limit games that you just referenced. I mean, I kid you not. I'll go do a freshman high school game for 2 hours, and it's just, oh God, it's a walk in the park. As we begin to wrap up here, one of the last things I want to get to is, we see a lot in the media about that obviously makes this stuff keep going and whatnot, the negativity and whatnot. Like I go back to, I think it's the guy on Twitter is John Boy, who I think he made his mark with the Aaron Boone Savages in the Box, all that stuff, and whatnot. What would you guys say to someone like him who basically has done this type of thing and gained a level of fame by exposing this stuff?
Well, I'll again, he's another New York guy, but again, he was great. He was talking to himself for a number of years. If you go look at his YouTube page, he's got videos with 15 views on it from not too long ago, a little over a year. So, and he was very nice to the umpires for a long time. He wouldn't include them. But since he's a Yankee fan and he hates the Astros and feels like the Astros, he's put a lot of videos that are pro Yankees and pro and anti-Astros, but he's also created this culture now of ripping on the umpire for no reason other than it's easy to punch down and, I'm popular now, it's okay. And I don't like that culture, and I don't like what he's doing. I think there would be nothing wrong with, he doesn't have to rip on the umpires all the time.
Right.
And that seems to be like something he enjoys doing, and that shows to me a general insecurity.
Well, the thing is that as you correctly surmised, he used to not have such a great following, and now he does. And he's realizing, as many people do realize, that when you punch down, you get more clicks, you get more views, which means you get more advertising revenue, which means you get more sponsors and you get more money. And it works. It's the moralistic capitalist equivalent of, well, exactly what I just said.
Yeah.
So, but he's discovering the reason that he's ripping on the umpires is he's discovering that it works. It simply works. It gets him his audience because remember, sports are that outlet that people go to engage in bad behavior without consequences. And who doesn't want to engage in bad behavior without consequences? Besides, well, most of us.
Well, I'll tell you what, Gil. Every engagement has consequences. You'll learn that the hard way someday, maybe.
I think that's called the pornography industry. But continue.
Well, no. I was talking about my own engagements myself. But
I see what you did there.
But an engagement.
Yes.
He's
having a little fun.
What ends up happening is these people who gain the followings are doing it very specifically, and they realize that the fast track to gaining the following is to criticize umpires in a way that is not rooted in fact but emotion, because emotion carries the day. People will respond if you validate their anger in a way that is fast and quick. They'll go along with it, and by simply playing a little clip of a video and going over it and saying, "Oh, look, the umpire's a terrible person. See, everyone who hates the umpires, you're right." That's a quick way to get the followers. But if you actually go to it and you go into a 5-minute dissertation, as I've been known to do, to talk about what the rule is, what the call is, what the angles are, keyhole, wedge, whatever you want to call it. If you actually want to go through the analysis of the thing and say, "Oh, let's time this. I have an obstruction from Toronto or Buffalo," weird, coming up, where I actually timed the play. I timed how long the obstruction, the actual hindrance of the runner was, versus the time difference between the fielder at the next base catching the ball and tagging the runner out. I did a scientific method on this. People don't want to be bothered and bored by that, but at the end of the day, it's the correct thing to do. Doing the right thing is not easy. It's not necessarily fun, and it's definitely not going to get you all the friends in the world. And by friends, I mean the fair weather fans that only follow you because you say what they want to hear.
Right.
John Boy's videos where he actually does really thorough analysis on Yankee stuff.
Great, yeah.
The great analysis videos have the fewest views, and this is in the modern day, August of 2020. His most popular videos are the 2 minutes. His niche is the 2-minute umpire bashing video. That's his bread and butter. But his actual thorough, thoughtful, insightful Yankee analysis videos that are longer get very, very few views. And that's very it's a symbolism that really extends to a whole bunch of other things that happen.
You're absolutely right. What I feel, not to toot my own horn a little bit, but I feel like that kind of described what I go through with OSIP, in that we don't, I hate to put it this way, we try not to sell out. And by not selling out, the number of people who download the podcast and click the websites and whatnot is not as high as I would ever like it to be. And it's the correlation is there. Final thing before I let you guys go. I had a friend of mine who is in the media. He works in the New York market. Great dude, love him to death. He has worked for a lot of Yankee media people and whatnot. And I was having a discussion with him. I think it was around the same time as the Savages in the Box thing, and I think there was also one with I want to say it was Greg Gibson down the first base line where he may have missed a home run because the ball, I think, hit the top of the yellow line on the wall instead of the yellow on the pole. And it was clearly a hard thing to see. And I think they got it right on replay eventually. But in the discussion I was having with him, I was basically mentioning, like, these are human people, they're going to make mistakes, and I'm sorry. And his response to me was, well, sorry doesn't fix the lamp. And, and maybe he used it, in the Billy Madison way of saying, well, sorry doesn't put the Triscuit crackers in my stomach. Now, does it, Carl? And I laughed hysterically, and then I went out and bought Triscuit crackers. But Triscuit crackers, if you're listening, if you'd like to sponsor the show, please contact me. But how do we respond to that? How do we get people to say, maybe that's not the right answer, or maybe there's a better answer, or something like that, if there is one?
This is what I've learned. Like 10 years ago, Tim would have been like, hey, to that guy, hey jerk. I have a website where I log all the replays every day. So what I can tell you is you just made that up. Yeah. And it's Angel Hernandez. Yeah. Okay. By the way, since you seem to know everything already and you're handing me, a lineup card. Now, don't talk to me ever again. No, but that's that's how you feel. That's why you talk about anxiety. Now I'm in a position where I actually remember having this conversation. I backed up like 4 steps, let them talk to those guys. I don't want to be part of this.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be part of the stupidity. But now I've lost the question. Now I've lost the question that you asked me. What
do you say to a guy who just says sorry, doesn't put the Triscuit crackers in my stomach?
So you can't fix these guys that don't understand the way it is. And, and I'm not a big fan of saying, well, how many games have you umpired? Because anybody can say that. How many movies have you made, Jack? You can't criticize a movie because you never made one.
Yeah.
You never coached NFL football, so you can't criticize a guy running the ball on 3rd and 8.
Right.
So absolutely. But what I would like to do is I tell people, and I don't have a card. Everybody says carry a card. Just do me a favor. Go to closecallsports.com. Engage with us a little bit. And most of them never do. A couple have written to me and said, I came here because, but that's the thing. I want to get people in a spot where they can say, hey, there's another side to this.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity for you to maybe be engaged and understand that tie doesn't go to the runner.
Right.
That's another thing that hey, there's a tie at first base. What happens? Oh, it goes to the runner. Like, right away.
This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Yep.
Doesn't know what he's talking about. And this is going to be the same guy that's arguing you from the dugout on a swipe tag at second base in the 5th inning of a 1-1 game. He's going to be screaming. Like, you can't fix the guys that don't want to be fixed, right? So we all know this. Like, if you want to get, self-improvement, you have to want it.
Right.
And most of these people don't want it. They just want to, as Gil's point earlier said, they just want to be angry. They want to yell at people. It has nothing to do with being angry towards the umpires. At that moment, though, they want to be yell at somebody, and we're convenient. And to that media person, I'm in the New York area. So I would love to know who that is, because I might know who that person is with all the people I know that work with the Yankees and Mets. And let me just tell you this, that I think the New York media is very fair to umpires. But that doesn't mean we still don't have work to do to educate, people as to, what an umpire's job is. Keith Hernandez is a great example.
Right.
He don't have a clue.
Yeah. He didn't know what a PB&J was recently.
Is that true? Wow,
that's very true. Yeah, and I think Ron Darling had to explain it to him. And now, I can't even look at him without thinking, like, what? I think there was a second spitter.
I want to say something else. Yeah, no, for sure. It was McDowell up on the gravelly road.
Exactly. That's one magic loogie.
You mentioned that Paul O'Neill is a jerk towards the umpires, and usually has been. But you know who's on those broadcasts and usually very fair to umpires, including the replay that happened yesterday? David Cohn.
Yes.
And David Cohn actually knows the rules. It's very bizarre. He actually has talked to umpires clearly, because he was talking the other day when Paul O'Neill said, that the umpire didn't see it. And Cohn goes, well, he wouldn't see that foul tip. He'd hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
In this Braves. And so that type of thing, telling, the fans the millions of people that are listening, that's very important to what we're trying to do. So
I've noticed ever since Chris Welsh started baseballrulesacademy.com that he's been very fair to the umpires on air. And when Brenneman might say something like, oh, that was a bad call, he comes in and says, well, this is the rule. This is what the umpire probably saw. And this is the reason that he doesn't do the. It appears that if you educate yourself, you're a more pleasant person. But what my advice to any of the umpires who have to deal with this stuff would be is to simply, I'm just going to read the rule that will constitute the breadth of my advice. It is in rule. You can find it in rule on the official baseball rules 8.00 at the very last section called General Instructions, and it states. Do not allow criticism to keep you from studying out bad situations that may lead to protested games. Carry your rule book. It is better to consult the rules and hold up the game 10 minutes to decide a knotty problem than to have a game thrown out on protest and replayed. You are no doubt are going to make mistakes, but never attempt to even up after having made one. Make all decisions as you see them and forget which is the home or visiting club. Umpire dignity is important, but never as important as being right, being positioned to see every play. Finally, be courteous, impartial, and firm, and so compel respect from all. And if you don't get that compilation of respect after that, that's okay.
Yeah. makes me yearn for the ideas of having headsets that I can go to on even a high school game just to say, hey, I need a rules check on something. But we haven't gotten to that point yet in technology. Gentlemen, before we wrap up, I'd like to turn it over to you guys if you have any final thoughts, anything you'd like to add before I plug you guys incessantly, and then thank you incessantly.
Well, I thank you for having us on. Any chance that we get to spread the message out, we're going to try to do that. And people have asked me, well, why are you promoting all these other websites? And Guild has promoted baseballrulesacademy.com that Cincinnati Reds analyst Chris Welsh has. And my argument is this: the more people that we can get talking about this, the better. I don't want to have, the code, the only person that's out there screaming about this. The more people we have like Chris and some of these other outlets that have popped up, that's great. And I hope that one of them becomes more popular than us.
Yeah.
Good luck. I mean, but it's really, really hard to get people to care about umpires. Really hard. They're not known entities. And the ones we do know, we're taught to not like, and there's one guy that I think has kind of, we haven't really talked about him all that much, that has kind of changed the way people view him. That's Greg Gibson. He used to be really not well liked, in that same NL range of Angel Hernandez and Joe West. And over the years, he's kind of become this cult icon, the home plate umpire, Greg Gibson.
Yeah. The only reason people know of the Greg Gibson, the home plate umpire, is because MLB promoted him. It's because in those YouTube videos, MLB put coming attractions or like their little ad bump at the end, a little 5-second clip of different things, and it always led off with the same 3 clips, and the lead clip of that was always the same thing. Greg Gibson, the home plate umpire, motioning to the benches, and the Dodgers celebrating in their dugout on that anthem standoff in St. Louis. So they promoted Greg Gibson simply by playing that clip. So people got to know Greg by name recognition and name recognition alone. And, the reason that I know Greg Gibson doesn't have anything to do with a bad call. It's actually a funny situation, so it made me laugh. That's a positive. Therefore, I think Greg Gibson is really good. That's how easy PR is.
Yeah.
He is pretty good.
We should probably start a Greg Gibson fan club.
We got to start the Jack Furlong one first. Time's sticking.
That's a whole other podcast. That's a dissertation that we have to write, and I have doctors who need to speak to you about that. Actually,
we didn't let Gil have it killed. We didn't kill. You didn't.
Yeah.
What?
You got anything to say?
I totally obliterated your final thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jerry's final thought.
May you never be on my show.
May you never be on my show. The final thought is on officiating. This pandemic has, for me, produced a most welcome, unexpected vacation, and it's caused me to really think about what do I like about the job and what do I not like about the job. And quite frankly, it's probably the same thing that many other people say. And in terms of you like the gig of just calling the game, doing the work, the actual officiating work, calling balls and strikes, or seeing someone celebrate because their team made a good play, or having that excitement. What you don't like about the gig is that a player or coach gets on you for some stupid reason that you might not see that they see, or they infer, or what have you, and they just won't shut up about it. And so that got me thinking of, well, maybe it's time for officials to set those stronger boundaries. And maybe it's not that bad of a thing to have a character like Joe West who doesn't take the gump that they want some of the newer people to take. Maybe that boundary setting is really important for your own well-being as an official. And then you just have to have that confidence to go forward and say, if someone's conduct, which is outside the confines of the game, outside the confines of the rules of the game, if someone's conduct is really distracting me and preventing me from giving my all to this job, then that needs to be addressed. And I should expect and I should accept that they're doing it, because that's on them and I'm not going to change them. and that's okay. But the rule book and the game is really quite clear on how that needs to be addressed. And I shouldn't act without hesitation in addressing the sportsmanship rules to promote good sportsmanship in the future and establish, because we talk about outstanding sportsmanship is paramount, and we talk about the promotion of sportsmanship, and we have to accept that sometimes negative reinforcement is quite necessary to establishing good sportsmanship for the future.
I couldn't have said it better. And I think what's great about that is that, you know, it's tough sometimes to be that parent. It's tough sometimes to set that boundary because we don't want to come off that way. But it becomes a necessity. And I think that's something that we can work on, not just in officiating, but I think in life too. Sometimes, you know, it's difficult to deal with confrontation. It's difficult to deal with conflict, and you know that's not specific to officiating or sports. So it leaves us in a really good place to know that there are plenty of good people in the world to you know, further promote the message, like the Tom Greaves of the world, to boost the confidence of a young umpire. And there's still plenty of work to be done. You know, when you see the likes of like a Phil Nevin or a Paul O'Neill and what they say about, you know, an Angel Hernandez, and you know, our job is never done. Whether it's here at OSIP or over at Close Call Sports. Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for being on. Once again, everybody, closecallsports.com is the premier website, in my opinion, for analyzing officiating, specifically right now with baseball. You know, the rules interpretations, the case plays, the ejections, the umpire ejection fantasy league, the whole nine, the podcast, the plate meeting, the guests they get are amazing.
It's a lot of stuff we do.
You do a lot. You guys do a lot. You know, and I consider it a major resource and you know, a great place to kind of, you know, waste a few hours sometimes.
And let me just say that, because that was all the stuff that Gil did. You know, we also chart and look at, and I look at it, you know, 100 plays a day probably, but, you know, and I send them all to Gil, and Gil's like, no, that one stinks. But
that's the PR. That's really easy, right?
But we also chart every replay. And we have, you know, a part of our website, and I think that's really cool to look at what umpires are missing. You know, obviously pickoffs have become an issue this year because we're social distancing in our tag play calls. So, you know, we're not only just doing that ejection stuff that everybody likes. We're getting really wonky with the numbers and the stats and trying to, you know, have a little bit of everything for everyone. I mean, you know, so I think that even the casual observer could go in and, you know, I know that there are certain, and I've told Gil about this, that there are certain broadcasts that are going to our site for the numbers of the replay numbers. So, you know, because it's updated.
Yeah.
I guess Major League Baseball was sending it out last year weekly, but we do it every day, or well, for the most part, depending on where I am. But, you know, trying to do that, it's just every little detail. And let me tell you what, I'm not into fantasy sports, but I think that if people want a free fantasy league, that the umpire ejection fantasy league is as cool as it comes, because it helps. It shows, for the most part, the official that is doing the best in terms of replay and ejections correctly. And that there's my plug for Close Call Sports.
Amen.
Thanks, Jack.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thank you again, Gil and Tim, for being here. Once again, closecallsports.com is the place to be. For OSIP, once again, it's osipfoundation.org, podcast at osipfoundation.org, facebook.com/OSIP Foundation, Twitter and Instagram at OSIP Foundation, hashtag how you play the game. That about wraps this one up. We thank everybody for being with us through this great discussion. I have to get back to my other day job as the baking umpire, where I have learned how to bake during this pandemic, and putting on the full uniform and ejecting people from the kitchen who try and eat things before they're ready is hilarious. And when that gets on YouTube, I expect millions and millions of subscribers. So, guys, thanks again. It's been a pleasure, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Thanks so much, Jack.
Thank you.
It's been great. Thanks, guys. And once again, to all of our listeners, thank you again for being with us. And until next month, treat each other with respect.
How You Play the Game is a production of the OSIP Foundation, Incorporated. The producer-engineer of this episode is Sean Ryan. Music by Soundspring Studio. The executive producer of How You Play the Game is Jack Furlong. For more information, visit osipfoundation.org.